Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Julie Ordoñez to talk about major gift officer challenges or challenges for the major gift officer. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm always curious to know my guest's superhero origin story. That is to say, how did you get started working with nonprofits?
I needed a job, Alex. I moved out to Los Angeles after graduating college in 2009. I went to TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. Go Frogs. And I knew I wanted to no longer live in Texas. Love you, but didn't want to live there. And I moved to LA, and a friend who knew me said, "Hey, I know this development associate job at this community center in South Central Los Angeles. I think you would be really good at development and fundraising." And I was like, "What? That's a job?" I had no clue. And so I went for it. I applied because I guess my friend saw something in me that I didn't know was there. And I went through the interview process, and they were like, "Look, we know you don't have any experience, but we will pay for you to get training. We think that you can add to the culture that we're trying to build." And so that was my first gig, and it was extremely stressful. I think in hindsight, I was doing, I think, 7 or 8 different jobs and working definitely overtime, way more than what they were paying me. I was being paid an hourly rate. I can't even remember what it was, but it was so low. And I really loved the fundraising piece of it, though. So my grant writing wasn't that great, I guess, because that was what caused them to fire me, like, I don't know, 14 months later. But the individual giving piece of like talking with people, building relationships, talking with companies, I did a really great job planning their gala. There were so many other components of the job that I did really well, and I actually fell in love with. And so my dream after that was to work at United Way, which years later I did. And that was really how I got my fundraising chops, so to speak. I really learned how to be a major gifts officer and all of the best practices. I had an incredible mentor, but that was really my start into the nonprofit world professionally.
It's a story I've heard many times before where people just seem to fall into the nonprofit space and they just get
Right.
stuck there. There's a stickiness to it, a love, a sense of fulfillment that isn't as easily found in other industries. But I'm curious to know, before that, you didn't mention about what you did. So your friend must have seen certain character traits or certain abilities that you had that could be applied to the world of development and fundraising. I'm just curious to know, if someone was even considering a move to that direction, are there any kind of markers that you would say that, if you're good talking to people or if you're good simplifying things, are there any kind of traits that you could say that you had that allowed you or allowed your friend to say, this would be a good fit?
I think that I am good at making friends, and I always have been, even when I was a child. And I think that being a major gifts officer is creating mission rooted friendships. When I was a kid, I lived on a really busy street corner in Houston, Texas, and a lot of people littered. They threw their like cans and cups out of the window as they zoomed by like 55 miles an hour. And I remember I think I was in 4th grade. Maybe I was even younger than that. And anyway, like 8 years old, maybe. And it really bugged me that people just threw their trash out the window and expected the concrete to somehow swallow it up. Like, what do people think? Littering just, of course, nobody loves littering. And I remember I was like, I'm going to do something about it. And I got my friends on my block, on my street, together on a Saturday morning. And I called it the Bluebonnet Club because the state flower of Texas is the bluebonnet. And, it's about the environment, right? And and my mom was a teacher, so I took roll. I called the roll. I was like, Chelsea here, Dylan here, and we took trash bags and we crossed this busy street and we went into the median and the other side of the street on a Saturday morning and picked up the trash. And that was looking back on that now, that was me starting a nonprofit. I was getting together the people who I had a relationship with and I knew I had influence with. I knew that they were my friends. And so even if litter didn't bug them the way that it bugged me, I could ask them to do this thing with me. It wasn't like, hey, you should go do that thing. No, it was like, hey, join me. And I just took action. I didn't wait for somebody else to do something. I didn't say, oh, the city should do a better job, although you could argue they should and they ought to. I just went and took care of it myself. And I think that that's what a lot of people in the nonprofit world are. They're entrepreneurial, but they see a problem in society and they want to do something about it. And they're not waiting for somebody else to come along and do it for them. And the same is true in fundraising. Like, people who are fundraisers are programs people. Like, if they weren't, they'd be in sales in the corporate world, which there's nothing wrong with sales in the corporate world at all. But people who decide to be fundraisers are doing it for the mission. They're doing it because they want to be a part of a team that's addressing this specific issue. And if you're someone like that, if you can bring people together, if you're someone who you just are a natural champion or advocate for a cause, you get people excited about things. I think those are the natural, maybe even, dare I say, stereotypical fundraisers. But the best fundraisers that I've ever learned from and worked with are deeply introverted and really relationally intelligent. They are strategic thinkers. They are thoughtful and considerate of others. They are relational savants and have a very high emotional IQ. So I don't mean to say that you have to be like me or extroverted or whatever to be a great fundraiser. I think that there's so many of us who bring so much to this profession, and I see beauty in all of it.
And one would think, at least initially, that extroverts are probably better at this position than introverts. But I agree with you. And just to make sure we have the same baseline definition, for me, an introvert, which is also what I consider myself to be, is just someone who recharges their batteries when they're alone or in a low energy environment.
Correct.
Versus extroverts get recharged when they're in a social situation or a collaboration type of effort. It has nothing to do with your skills or whatnot. It's really just how you recharge your batteries, where you need to. Yeah. So
yep.
Cool. We agree on that, and I agree that introverts, as a result of that, just has just more time to do some reflection. Not to say that extroverts don't, but all right, this is moving into psychology, but let's shift maybe more toward major gift officer. So I'm going to just pretend I'm ignorant for a second, and let's just define in the role of a major gift officer, what are the main responsibilities? Like, what is a major gift officer, for one? What do they do?
That's a great question. I love this question. A major gifts officer is someone who builds mission-rooted friendships with donors and partners and raises major gifts for the organization you work for. And typically, there's a goal. There's a fundraising goal. Let's say you need to raise 20 million and you've got 3 major gifts officers and a director of major gifts, that goal is the responsibility of that major gifts team to go get that 20 million. And the way in which you're leveraging your unique strengths, you're connecting and building relationships with people who are going to help you get to that 20 million. And you're doing it in a way where it's sustainable. You're meeting with a lot of people one-on-one. That's always the primary strategy. One-on-one relationships, one-on-one meetings. It's evergreen. It's what has worked forever, and it will work forever. There is no way around that. One-on-one conversations there's no technology, there is nothing that will ever be better than that. And I would say that's the primary role of the major gifts officer. And you're representing your organization to the community, to businesses. You are their point of contact. You are the face of what you're doing.
In terms of the one-on-ones, I totally agree. Do you think there's a difference? Well, there is a difference, but what is the difference between face-to-face one-on-one meetings versus virtual ones, which are now more popular?
I think when you're in person, what is it, like 80% of communication is nonverbal. So there's so much that's missed and that's lost. We're not able to use our full, and I'm going to use your language, we're not able to use our full superpowers when we're in person, you can catch so many things that are not easily caught on Zoom. Yeah, it's tough, but I mean, looking in tips for Zoom would be looking in the camera, because then it appears to the person you're meeting with that you're looking them in the eye and that you're doing that periodically. Another tip that I love to use, whether in person or on Zoom or on the phone, is to say the person's name, their first name, a few different times. There's so much psychology behind that, but it just makes sure that you're on the same page together, that you're both actively listening. And I would ask questions, and so much of my work is helping people become better listeners. The nonprofit world, the majority of the nonprofit world sucks at listening. We're really good at talking. We talk and we talk and we talk, and we dump a lot of information on people that is completely unnecessary. I would say 90% of it. And we lack the discipline to simplify, to clarify, to boil things down. We lack the discipline of getting to the point. And it makes it so much more difficult to raise millions of dollars when you're long-winded, when you write emails that no one wants to read. You're bored writing it, I mean, we have to become better communicators. And I think that that's a huge piece. Whether you're on Zoom, whether you're on the phone, whether you're in person, the moments that you do talk need to be powerful and to the point and direct.
I could definitely have a conversation about using people's names, because I understand the psychology behind it too. It is people's favorite word.
Right.
And at the close second to that, in case you don't know the person's name, is the word you, which is why a lot of advertisements you see on billboards and in the news and online, it uses the word you, sometimes in a weird way. I've seen organizations rephrase sentences that could be simpler if phrased differently, have convoluted the sentence in order to incorporate the word you as many times as possible. Your way and your
right.
But also that dives again back into the psychology element of things, which definitely gets my attention, but it kind of deviates a bit from the topic. So I'll jump then to my next question. Is you mentioned the word sustainable in terms of, and I'm curious to know what that means to you as a major gift officer. When you say, because you use the sentence, I believe, something like, if someone is donating $20 million, we want to make sure it's sustainable, that you're building the relationship. So what does that word sustainable mean in that context?
It means to ask for more. Here's what we do. We don't ask for what we actually need and want. And then we get frustrated when we don't get what we wanted in our head that we didn't state aloud. So I was meeting with a client yesterday, and she asked this ultra high net worth individual for support. She just kind of left it open ended and shared the goals. Look, our goal is 6 million. I've already raised 2 million of that. Can we please, can you consider giving something? And in the past, this person has given $1 million, 2 million, several 7-figure gifts. So they're good for it, right? And leaving it open-ended, she believed that that was the best tactic in that moment, which is fine. That's great. There's a time and a place for that. And she was coming to me, and she hadn't heard back from him. It had been 2 months since she had that conversation, and was concerned, like, oh no, maybe he's not going to give. Maybe his wife is telling him, like, look, you've already given them so much money. What are you doing? And John Gordon, a brilliant author, says, when there is a gap in communication, negativity usually fills that space. So when we don't hear from someone and we don't communicate either, we don't hear back, we start to make negative assumptions. It's human. It's natural. And that leads to burnout, constantly believing the worst about people. Unsustainable. So I was coaching her on her mindset. Hey, when you go into that spiral of, oh no, and making negative assumptions, it's based on nothing, actually. It's not even substantive. Let's look at the facts. What are the facts? He already told you yes. He already said he was going to give. So it's in the bag. We just have to collect the cash, basically. We have to figure out, what is he going to do? So, because you left it open-ended, which is fine. So she says, okay, well then let's work on this email, this follow-up email to him. So she starts writing it. She's like, hey, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for saying yes. Let me know if you would like to meet with me, and I'll meet with you again and your wife if she has more questions, and we can kind of talk about some ideas. And I said, what are you doing? You don't want that. You don't want to meet with them again and talk about ideas. What you actually want is to know, hey, are you going to donate? How much are you going to give? And when are you going to do it? But you're not asking for that. And if you ask for another meeting to ideate, whatever that means, then that's probably what you're going to get. And then you'll be frustrated that you didn't get it. This entire thing is a giant waste of time. Unsustainable, leads to frustration, leads to slow results, leads to burnout, leads to people leaving the profession because they don't say what they mean, and they don't ask for more, and they don't arrive at the point. We are accustomed to beating around the bush and, because it's rooted in all of these negative assumptions, and we're wasting freaking time instead of spending your energy going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in your mind about whether or not you should ask a $5,000 donor for $10,000. So much of your precious brain energy, emotional energy, going towards a very low risk decision leads to burnout. So what the most sustainable thing to do is to actually focus on your highest and best opportunities. Your biggest donors should get the vast majority of your energy and your time and your headspace. And then focus on donors that are giving much smaller amounts. Because if you do the reverse, you will be frustrated with your lack of progress and how slow you're moving. it takes just as much energy to ask for, a large gift that could be a massive boost in momentum for you and your team. Or you could focus on, 2,000 here, 5,000 there, 10,000 here, 1,000 there, 2,000 here, and slowly stack it up to 20 million. Good grief. How exhausting is that? Rather, when we do things that we're afraid to do, when we muster the courage to do it, when we actually execute on it, it's deeply energizing. Fear is exhausting and it's not sustainable. So if we continue to let fear and assuming the worst of people run the show, it is a surefire way to burn out.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second because an argument could be made that the smaller ones, the smaller wins, will give you that sense of confidence to be able to build the confidence to a level where you can say, okay, now I can ask for larger numbers because I've had all these successes with these smaller ones. They're lower risk, and therefore I don't need as much courage to ask for a small amount as I would for a large amount. Building up that courage, building up that strength, building up the knowledge, building up the language as practice, so that when you do get to the $1 million, multi-million dollar asks, you already have this portfolio and history of success to lean on, as opposed to starting off and asking for the really, really big numbers first, which I agree, if you can get, everything else seems like a piece of cake. Yeah, so I'm curious to know how you would approach that argument.
Yeah, so it's both. I don't think you're playing devil's advocate. I don't think we're saying two different things. That's why I created my program, Courage Lab, because you do exactly that. You slowly build your courage. And the first thing that you do in week 1 of the training program is ask for a 10K gift. And then by the end, so many leaders have raised a $30,000 gift, a $100,000 gift, so much bigger donations because they over time built up the courage and the confidence that they know they can actually do this. The problem is that a lot of people, for some reason, are a director of development, a major gifts officer, and they're given all of these other tasks to do that are not raising money. And then the very thing they were hired to do, they don't have time to do, which is insane to me. And so many organizations, even if you're really small, let's say you're raising $200,000 a year, you have one donor who is giving you 50K, and they are extremely wealthy, and you do not have the courage to ask them for $1 million, and you know that they could give it and you know they would give it. There is always, even with a very small organization, someone who could be giving 10x what they are giving now. And all you need is a moment of 60 seconds of discomfort in asking. and the opportunity is there. So I say that because if you have someone already in your portfolio who has the ability, you know who they are, and you're not asking them for enough. And consider the amount of effort that it takes to get all of these gifts. It takes the same amount of effort. It's the same amount of time to ask someone for 100K as 10K. So we have a problem in the sector with prioritizing our time, and we let our fear prioritize our time, not actually what's most efficient, what's most effective, what's most strategic. If you got a 100K gift, it would give you that immense boost. You would be, this happened to my client the other day. They closed a $2 million gift in 25-minute conversation on the phone.
Wow.
from someone who was giving $250,000, which is already a large gift, but they were leaving a lot of money on the table. And after one session with me, they realized how the way forward and how much money they were leaving on the table. And then 2 days later, they went and got it, $2 million.
Wow.
So this happens all the time. I do this every single day of the week, and I've been doing this for 14 years. And people think, well, I don't have donors like that. I guarantee you do. Your fear doesn't allow you to see them.
In leveraging that word courage, are there other ways to build? It sounds like courage is a pivotal character trait to have or to build.
Oh, yeah.
So aside from getting these small wins, are there any other ways that you recommend someone to build their courage? And it doesn't necessarily need to be, I guess, in the nonprofit space. I think there are, you can benefit yourself in many different ways as a person that, of course, will then help you with your work. So just keeping the floor open completely, what are some other maybe key ways that someone can build their courage to help them ask for these big asks?
So it's two main things. Taking risks. So the way to become more courageous that ultimately results in confidence is taking action, doing the thing that you're afraid to do. And you can totally start small. For some people, that might be setting boundaries with a parent. Look, you call me every single day. I don't want to talk every single day. I'm only available to talk once a week. Your parent is most likely going to love you no matter what you do. So it's a pretty low risk, but still risky for someone who maybe doesn't have that boundary. Another might be, telling someone that something that they did or said hurt your feelings and being honest about it. That's a risk. Usually they're in relationships. Usually it requires you being vulnerable, putting yourself out there, being more visible, starting a business, making a move. Those are risks. Doing the thing that you know in your heart you ought to be doing. You know that you can't shake it. It's something that you must do. It is time to do it. And the reason that you don't have confidence in yourself is because your subconscious knows you have these desires and you don't actually do anything about them. Right. And and everyone deals with this. I talk so much about courage, Alex, because I was a coward. I only did things that I knew I was going to succeed in. I only did things where I looked the best and I was in the best light, which meant that I had to play it safe all the time. It was all about me. That is the coward's way. You've got to look like you're flawless and you're only going to do things that you know are a sure thing. And the nonprofit space is filled with well-intentioned cowards. And I can say that because I've been one. And I know. I completely get it. You only ask for $2,500 because you know they're going to say yes. I mean, that's all about you. That isn't about your mission anymore. Because you need to hear yes. Why? And that's something that happens inside Courage Lab is people learn that no isn't fatal. They can handle it. So the first is taking risks. In order to build courage, you need to take action. There is no way around it. The second is
Can I jump in for a second before we get there? Because there's a beautiful diagram I once saw that dealt, if you imagine a Venn diagram with circles, circle within a circle within a circle, and in the innermost circle is your comfort zone. And that's where, to your point, most people stay. And then the larger circles, the circles on the outside, are actually where all the fun things happen in the sense of you have to kind of push past that comfort zone. And once you do, and as you slowly do that, over the years, you look back and you realize how large your circle has become.
Mm.
For example, I find a shortcut for doing this is to travel, because travel by its very nature puts you out of your comfort zone at a physical level. You have to figure out how to navigate from the airport to where you're staying. And maybe it's a new language, new currencies you have to adopt. It forces you physically in a situation where you are going to be uncomfortable. And you, depending on, of course, where you are in the world, that level of comfort will be higher or lower. But the idea is that the more, in my sense, you travel, the shortcut, the fast track to build that level of confidence, to realize that everything you have, everything you need to be confident, to take risks, to be courageous is actually already inside you. And you just have to open it up and access it. It's not something outside that you have to accomplish to get to it. It's all already inside you.
That's right. Yep. And I would say the second piece to that is community. So if your circle of people you're surrounded with that you talk to daily, weekly, regularly are people who are in their comfort zone, it's going to be near impossible for you to sustain becoming a more courageous person. And you've got to change your community. You have to choose to be around people who you admire, who you think are maybe better than you, and become their friends. Get on a team with them, serve people with them, be on mission with them, make their life easier somehow. Be a friend to the people who you want to become more like. And this is why my program, Courage Lab, is a community. It's a cohort of leaders, because it isn't enough to make a commitment to become courageous and take risks. You have to do it in the context of community. Life change and life transformation happens in relationships. It doesn't happen in isolation. So if we want to become more courageous, we're changing the fabric of who we are at the core. And that's done with people. So community is everything. You have to pick your people wisely. Who do you let speak into your life? Who are you letting influence you? Because you will become more like them. And I know it's really popular to talk about that now, but it is true. If you're around people who want you to stay as you are and benefit from you staying as you are, you've got to change that.
There's an expression that says, show me who your top closest friends are, your 5 top closest friends are, and I'll show you who you are. Because to your point, you are heavily influenced by those people, and you're
Yep.
actually able to choose who those people are. So if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. To your point as well, finding people that you admire, you can look up to, who will challenge you, who will encourage you, who will support you, and you can do, of course, the same in reverse. When you choose those 5 people, and I imagine a life partner is one of those typically, your whole reality can change dramatically. If you're with a person that brings you down or is an energy vampire, you will adopt some of their behaviors and thoughts and ways of thinking that you probably don't want for yourself, that aren't beneficial to you. So picking those 5 top people are critical for your life.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I would also add the idea of a tribe, finding your tribe. So aside from those 5 top people, what I also recommend to those is finding a cohort or a tribe of people that are in the similar kind of spirit as you are, in vain or challenges, and then work together, problems, find your community, whether it's like a Slack channel or a online forum or something like that. They don't have to be so close to you, but just an ability for you to share some of your thoughts, concerns, worries, and support each other on a more ongoing basis. I actually have regular meetings with certain people that I've chosen, phone calls, half an hour every week, just to connect with people who are in adjacent fields as I am, just to be able to share thoughts, share ideas. And I find that's a tremendous way to improve and to gain courage and to learn and to just be better.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So I'm then curious. Obviously, the one of the main roles of a major gift officer is asking for major money. So how does one ask a donor for $1 million? That's not usually something you can go up to a stranger and say, hey, can I have $1 million for my organization? I'm curious to know that from the perspective of the officer and from the donor, one from the officer of how do you, and obviously this could be a conversation in itself, so maybe we'll just keep the highlights. get to the point where you're able to walk up to someone and say, how I would like $1 million, please. And then part two of the question is, where does the donor, what's going through the donor's mind in order to say yes to that question?
So these are really big questions, Alex. You shouldn't ask anyone for money who you don't have a relationship with. And I say relationship with in the sense that it could be the major gifts officer, you personally. It could be that the donor has a relationship with the founder, with the CEO, with someone in the organization, and they have a level of trust with the organization. So if that doesn't exist, then that needs to be built. I definitely love cold outreach. I love reaching out to people who are really wealthy. Let's say that I work for an animal welfare organization and I find out about this really wealthy person. I'm reading an article and I see their name and I look them up and they're on Forbes, and I have line of sight to their wealth, right? And let's say they're just ultra high net worth. Their net worth is well over $30 million US. And I Google them, I find out that they love animals. They're all about animals. There's nothing stopping a major gifts officer from reaching out cold to that person or going to your board or your team and saying, hey, do you know this person? Does anyone have a connection to this person? I think that they would be a great fit to partner with us. And something that I teach my clients is we're not coming for their money. We're coming for their whole life. And that includes their money. And it usually starts with their money. But when I'm working in major gifts and creating a custom strategy, I'm thinking about who are the people who are mission aligned. They're on the same mission as us. I don't need to convince them to care about animals. They already care. And this is listening. There are lots of ways in which I can look online and see that they care. Second would be that they have the capacity, right? Do they have the wealth to do that? And are they already givers? Do they give their money away? So there's plenty of people who care about animals. There's plenty of people who are wealthy, but are they generous? And then it comes down to the major gifts officer's level of courage. So oftentimes you can have a donor who's generous, a donor who's mission aligned, and a donor who has the capacity. But if you don't have the guts, then none of that matters. So people say, oh, well, we don't have wealthy people, or, oh, I wish that we had access to more wealthy people. You have wealthy people who care right now in your database. And you are too chicken to ask them for more. So it usually starts with the people who gave you $200 or $20 a month or $1,000 random gift because a friend sits on the board and asks them to donate. That's where major donors usually come from. You could also do cold outreach like I described. I love doing that. I think that it's a best practice. I think major gifts officers should be looking at their dream list of people who are the wealthiest people in the world who care deeply about animal welfare. And let's reach out to them and try to get their attention somehow once a quarter. And let's just call it a moonshot. Let's go for it. Why not? That should be incorporated into your regular practice. And you ask people who you get to know, you ask them questions. It's the same thing in interpersonal relationships in real life. You get to know people and who they are by asking questions and in conversations. So you have a lot of conversations with people who you think care, who you suspect are interested because they're talking to you. They're giving you the time of day. They're meeting with you. They came to your event. They're responding to your email, whatever it is. So when you uncover what makes people tick, then you can invite them into playing a deeper, more significant role and a deeper partnership into what you're doing. If you learn how much they care about animal welfare, or even how much they love your organization, and to what extent they trust you, if you have an understanding of that, then you can ask for exponentially more money.
I really picked up on those words, the word partner with us when talking to the donor and coming for their whole life, not for their money.
Yeah.
These, I think, are really good, I was going to say positioning statements, but more like concepts that are better than I'm coming for your money. Whether you come with me or not is a different story, but the concept of partnering with someone, even with a donor, is a great philosophy. It's a great mindset.
Yes. And my client got the $2 million pledge. And then she said, oh, and I should have asked for this. And I said, it's okay. We're in partnership with this person. There's time. This $2 million is the start. We will go back and have many conversations. And the next one will likely be, I need your help to connect with more people who are on this mission with us. Who do you know? Who should I be talking to? I need you to make some introductions. I need you to open some doors for me. What can you do for me? How can you help me? And it's going to your donors and leveling with them. Like, have an honest, real, direct conversation. Hey, you're our dream partner. Here are the reasons why. I want to find more people like you. I know that you're, unique. But these qualities are what we're looking for in ideal partners. Do you know anybody like that? Who really cares about what we're doing and is already investing in it that we should be talking to? Those kinds of questions are really powerful, and you learn so much in asking really great questions. And so my biggest piece of advice would be, if you're going to change one thing, ask better questions.
I love it. There's one facet I always like talking about during these kinds of conversations, and that's technology. Being a tech guy myself, I'm all about the apps and the tools and ways to leverage these things to make us be able to produce better results. And I'm curious to know, from the major gift officer perspective, are there any particular tools that you generally either recommend or notice in the market that are useful? And I was curious to know specifically, what do you think about wealth engines?
Yeah, that's great. So I love just really, really practically using my CRM, putting in meeting notes, things I learn about donors, putting that data in there. If it's like, let's say that I run an art museum. If I learn the type of art that this donor loves, I would put that in there as that information. So that would be one example. I'm looking at my CRM at the top of every single day and looking at my open opportunities. What are the asks that I've made recently that I need to close? What are the things that are coming up, and who do I need to prioritize to get a meeting with, to have a touch point with? That should be something that we're looking at every single day. What money just came in yesterday that I can pick up the phone and call the donor and just say thank you? The CRM and everything that's in there really helps to guide and prioritize my time and my day. I love MailTrack, or any sort of plugin for Chrome that allows you to see when people open your emails that you send them from Gmail. If they click on the links that you send, you can see how many opens, you can see how frequently they've opened, when. I think that information is really useful, because donors who don't if they don't really care, then they won't open the email. It'll just go straight to the trash. But the fact that they're opening it 8 times, I'm like, oh, I'm going to keep emailing you, even though you haven't responded. So that kind of data, I think, is really useful. There's so many like productivity systems and tools, and there's so much tech that is super useful. I just find that most nonprofits are usually 10 years behind, and that's being generous in terms of adopting technology. So we could talk about all this stuff, but I mean, ultimately, I want people to just ask for more money and wealth engines. So researching wealth and net worth, a few things about that. I have offered that as part of working with me one-on-one in my program where I help you create a custom major gift strategy, and I'm your strategist and your coach for 6 months. Part of that was you have access to get like 5 different donor profiles done, basically like a 2-page report on this donor, where they give, how much they give, what's their net worth, where are their assets, and a sense of their giving capacity. So how much does this prospect researcher, based on what they've found, recommend that we ask for? And honestly, I love doing research to help inform the qualitative pieces of my outreach. So what am I going to say in this email? But in terms of wealth engines, if you're a really big organization and you have a really big team, you've got, 30, 50 plus people in the fundraising department, I could see the wealth engine is really useful in helping you to parse through massive lists of donor data. But outside of that, research, we use that as an excuse to prioritize people with wealth. And I think it's more important to prioritize people who are passionate and who are generous, who happen to have wealth. So wealth engines are like, oh, bing, 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 this person is a billionaire. That's who you should focus on, Alex. Number 1 priority. But that billionaire doesn't really give their money away, or they don't really care about your cause. Or if they do care about your cause, but they are not really generous, then it's kind of like, why are we wasting our time when there's all these other people who have all 3? They are wealthy, they care, they're generous. So I think sometimes it can be a distraction, wealth engines. And the best research that you'll ever get from your donor is from their mouth. And now we're recording this, it's 2023. The luxury of our global society and tons of information and being connected digitally and knowing way too much about way too much. Privacy is a luxury. And donors give anonymously. There are ways in which they can conceal their wealth. And that is a priority for many people for lots of different reasons. So you could pull data from a wealth engine, but it doesn't always give you the full story. And typically my clients know more about the donor than the wealth engine does. They're like, oh, actually, they just told me they own this commercial property of this piece of real estate, in Ohio. And that doesn't show up anywhere in this prospect research. I think having conversations with people is the best research that you're going to get.
Like any other tool, you got to use it as a tool and not lean on it too much. But it could serve, it sounds like it could serve at least as a starting point to try to connect with people who might be outside of your immediate circle. But then you're right, there's no substitute for an actual one-on-one relationship with that individual.
Right.
Julie, this has been great. I'm sure people have lots of questions. We didn't even get to all of the topics I was hoping to cover today, but that's totally okay because it leaves the opportunity for people to contact you directly. So if you could share more about your coaching program, and I know you have a podcast as well, how can people get in touch with you through those?
Sure. I love to hang out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really having a moment, right, Alex? I really love it there. And so follow me there. And I'm also on Instagram. I share, insights and thoughts and things that I'm learning about major gifts and leadership, how to build a culture of generosity in your nonprofit on Instagram. And then my website is julieordonez.com. And I am the host of Nonprofit Courage Lab podcast. So I love doing that and connecting with people and helping them become more courageous. So connect with me. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to put all the links in the show notes below. Julie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.